Mothers and daughters, a unique bond many moms say is like no other, a friendship and closeness that spans a lifetime filled with special moments and conversations. But it's also a relationship that can be strained and difficult, complicating and disrupting connections for generations. Good evening. Welcome to our monthly WHUT-TV, WHUR Daily Drum TV special, Mom and Me, a time to heal with our daughters. I'm Harold Fisher. She's the apple of your eye, your mini-me, but sometimes the mother-daughter relationship can go sour. How do you get it back on track and return to a place of hope and healing? My first guests have found themselves in the midst of that mother-daughter storm. They will share their story and what it took to mend their bond. Jerry Godhigh is a 54-year-old mother of 4 grown children. She is a certified life coach. And Jamia Ponder is Jerry's 36-year-old daughter who has her own 3 children and is working to break the cycle of strained mother-daughter relationships. Jamia is also a certified life coach, and they are co-authors of the book, Deeper Women Teach Anthology. It focuses on mothers and daughters healing their relationships, including some very important life lessons. Also with us tonight, Dr. Frederica Brooks Davis, a clinical psychologist and executive director of the Restoration Center Incorporated in Prince George's County, Maryland. Tonight's broadcast is being live streamed on WHUR.com, YouTube, and Facebook. While we will not be taking any phone calls, we invite you to join the conversation online using the hashtag Mothers and Daughters. I want to begin tonight with Jerry. Jerry, welcome to the program, and explain your style of parenting, raising Jamia and her siblings.
Sure. Thank you, Harold, and thank you for having us on. It's a blessing. And so there are 4 types of parenting that I've thus learned recently as Jamia and I have gotten into the life coaching, thus now getting over what we've been through. But there's authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, and then uninvolved parenting. So uninvolved parenting, as we know, is a parent that's no longer really involved in the child's life, but authoritative is something that we all strive to be, which is reasonable, nurturing, there for their child, their daughter, showing them life learned lessons. Authoritarian, of course, we know is a strict disciplinarian, and the permissive, which is indulgent, most let their parents make their own decisions. And I grew up under a permissive parent. And so I thought that was the way to go, although I think I went the other way on more of authoritarian. And so I raised her in a strict environment. And so I believe that through my strict environment, it kind of led her to do some things that maybe could have been avoided. But I did about what I learned from growing up. And that's why one of the things that we're wanting to do now is to help daughters break generational curses, and not just do them because that's the way you were taught or that's the way you were dealt with, but now to be better and to do better now that we know better. And so because of that, I was strict on her. I did allow her to grow up as a little girl. I kind of made her be an adult before her time. She helped raise her brothers. Because I felt like it was hard for me raising 2 other little boys at that time while she was growing up. And so she had to grow up fast. She had to be almost like an adult. And so I made her be strong. She didn't have time to cry. She didn't have time to be weak. She didn't have time to whimper. She didn't have time to do anything but grow up and learn how to survive, how to be strong. And that's what
Jerry,
I thought.
let me ask you, because what do you say would be the most difficult or challenging moments with Jamia? Talk to me specifically about what you 2 went through.
Right. So I guess the most challenging moments that we had was because Jamia, when I got married, Jamia was already born. She was 6 years old. And so we had a strained relationship with her natural father. So between my husband and her father, we had a strained relationship, and we did not let her see him. And we didn't know that it was affecting her. But because of the effect she then became an inward person. So she did not express her opinions. She didn't express anything. And therefore, when she got molested, she didn't share it with us. And so it caused us a rift because she felt like she couldn't come to me and I was not available for her. And so we then had to try to develop a better relationship of communication and be able to communicate with each other. But I didn't know that it was missing until she communicated with me. I thought I was doing all right, right? I thought I was doing the right thing, but didn't really realize that my daughter was drowning. And so,
Jamia, let's talk to you about that, because your mother said something that I'm sure our listeners and viewers may say, okay, whoa, she said molested. And so that's, that's a big deal, obviously. But before we even talk briefly about the impact that that had on your relationship with your mother, talk to me about your view of your childhood and your relationship with your mother. How would you describe her as a parent?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. But
Sure.
I do agree a lot with what my mom said in terms of the type of parent that she was growing up. And I did have a lot of responsibility, a lot of things that I feel like at 6, 7, 8, you shouldn't be doing, shouldn't be taking care of. I was what they call a latchkey kid back in the day, so I had my key around my neck and my mom was physically there, but not emotionally there. And so she had a lot of things and time and vantage points vested in other things outside of me. So I felt like growing up, I had my mom, but I also felt closer to my grandparents. I felt like they knew me. My mother's parents knew me best. So, growing up, I felt like she spent a lot of time putting on a face. And so I felt like that's what I had to do. You don't have time to cry. Like she said, you have to put on a face and it's got to be all right. You have to be all right because I need you to be all right. I don't have time to deal with another thing. And so that does impact the way that you're able to communicate with your mother when you don't feel like you can take your troubles to her because she's too busy, or maybe she won't understand, or, will just tell you to suck it up.
So with that said, it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was an issue with you communicating with your mother. The relationship was troubled before this tragic, horrible thing happened to you, which is why you could not talk to her about that?
Yeah. And I felt like, I had done something wrong, right? You're always taught take responsibility. And I felt like, well, for one, I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't want to get in trouble. And I felt like I would be in trouble by bringing that. So I just swallowed it. I said nothing. I filed it away in things that we never talk about.
And how old were you when this happened?
I was 14.
You were 14. Let me ask Dr. Brooks Davis, because, Dr. Brooks Davis, this is a very, complicated situation. Obviously, we have an issue of molestation and the like, but Jamia says that the relationship was already fractured before she was 14. Talk to me about what you're hearing, and is this typical?
Is it typical that mother and daughters have difficult relationships? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, exactly.
So it is not uncommon that mothers and daughters will have difficult relationships, particularly depending upon the age of the child. All right. So at the point in which a child is preparing for individuation, when they become a teenager, at that point, oftentimes you find mothers saying, I'm not sure what's happening. But other reasons why mothers and daughters can have difficulty is sometimes mothers will see themselves in their daughters. And so while they are saying and wanting not to repeat a cycle or not wanting their daughter to follow in the same path, they see those same tendencies, if you will, in their daughter. And as a result of that, oftentimes they can react to what they see versus being present with the daughter, because the daughter may not go down the same path. And so, unfortunately, because there is an assumption that they haven't worked through, it causes conflict.
Mm-hmm. But these things happen. Mm-hmm. And so, Jamia, do you remember a specific incident that said to you, this is an untenable relationship that you have with your mother, or was this just a series of things that forced you to, as you said, swallow it, to shut down?
Yeah, I think it's a series of things. And, you start to think back over your childhood and some of the messages that you've received. You don't just get to that point, overnight, right? You usually, when you're a kid, you don't have a filter at all. You say it all. And so at some point, after so many times of being corrected, that becomes the natural behavior. And so I really like what Dr. Brooks Davis was saying in terms of the type of parent and recognizing certain things in your child that you either love or you wish that you could change about yourself. And so I think the problem happens and the rift happens in most relationships because we as moms are being the mother that we wish we had instead of the mother that our daughters and our sons need us to be.
Mm-hmm. Jerry,
Yes.
would you say that was also the case for you? Were you trying to prevent Jamia from committing the same mistakes that you had?
Absolutely. I had Jamia when I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school. And I was determined at that point that we would no longer have a teenage mom or pregnancy in our family. And it was my duty to make sure that Jamia would not go down that road. And Jamia was very much like me, personality-wise, outgoing, loving, kind, just out there as far as sweet. And I just wanted to make sure that she was strong enough to withhold whatever might come her way. And so I didn't want her to go down that road of no direction because my mom wasn't a disciplinary. And so I was able to do a lot of things that maybe I shouldn't have had the opportunity to do. And so I was determined that she would be different and that I would have my hands on her and she would not go down the wrong path. And so I was right. I was right. Exactly what, she said is that I try to do different. And then maybe too much to the left than to the right.
So, Jamia, when did you decide that it was time to get to that healing process with your mother? How old were you? What was happening? What was the determining factor that said, I've got to fix this?
Yeah. So I was 34 at the time, and I started my own personal healing journey and realized that within my own parenting, within my own marriage, I carried a lot of stuff that I learned erroneously, a lot of trauma shielding mechanisms that I had adopted that were not healthy, and they weren't purporting the goals that I had set forward in my own marriage and in my own life and in my own parenting. And so as I started to heal, I started to slowly share those things with my mom and share the things that I had experienced and really emphasize the impact that it had to date. And so in that, that very slow process is when I kind of realized maybe our relationship is not as great as I think that it, or as we tell everyone, right? I have a good relationship with my mom. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? But it wasn't anchored in honesty. It wasn't anchored in, forthrightness. It wasn't anchored in all the good things that a positive, healthy relationship should be. So I think that's really what was the springboard for me sort of wanting to strengthen my relationship with my mom.
And Dr. Brooks Davis, Jerry said that she didn't want her daughter to repeat her same mistakes. But does that reinforce some of those mistakes when you try to prevent that same thing from happening to your daughter?
So that's a great question. So consciously, sometimes it's unconscious, right? So we have a parent, we're raised, and in Jerry's case, she said, I don't want my daughter to make the same mistakes I made. The question, though, is whether or not Jerry took the time to figure out how did she arrive at the quote unquote mistakes. And if you're absent from actually being able to internalize that and find those answers before you look to shift the pattern, you're then doomed oftentimes to repeat the same pattern because you don't have the insight. So in this particular case, it's helpful then for mothers and fathers who say, I don't want to repeat the same cycle. First off, you must understand, what is the cycle? What was the undertone? Where did it come from? And then you can consciously make decisions that are very different, that will bring it to a different end, versus saying, as Jerry alluded to, that she knew her focus was, my mom was permissive, so now I'm going to come in and be the disciplinarian. When at the end of the day, that really wasn't the issue, but that's all she knew to do.
So what was the issue?
So the issue was that there was an insight, if you will, in terms of, what am I doing that I need to, number one, change? What am I doing well? But the other piece of that is, who do I want my daughter to be? And how do I need to mother her in that way? So instead of focusing on, I'm going to be a disciplinarian, and if I do that, then she won't get pregnant, the focus there was not building that relationship and understanding what was required to be a mother, because it was more action and driven by action than it was the holistic approach of, what does my daughter need, and having a conversation with her to, number one, even see if she wanted to have a baby at 14 or at 18. So it's building that relationship, much of what Jamia talked about, that was, it sounds like, was missing from their relationship from day one.
So Jamia, when you spoke to your mother the first time, when you went to her, do you remember that day? Do you remember what you said?
I wish I did. I wish I did. That would be really good for this question. But I do know that I started kind of with where I was and then worked my way backwards, right? Because sometimes we can't unfold, you can unpeel the layers one at a time. And we don't really know what's under there until we get to it. So I know I started with where I was currently, present day. This is what I'm struggling with, and I'm struggling with it a lot. And here are the reasons why, and maybe even here's why you can help, where you can help me, right? I brought that to my mom too. Like, this is where you can probably help me with this, if you can, or if you're strong enough. And if not, then I had to move on to the next phase. But I had to decide within myself that no matter what my mother said, that I was committed to my own healing. I was committed to my own wholeness, and not just for me, but for my children as well.
So Jerry, do you remember when that moment came about? Do you remember what she said, how you felt, your response? Were you surprised?
I think I was a little surprised. I think I had an awakening at some point during her time of telling me that she was going through therapy and she needed help. Because honestly, because I was doing so much and I was trying to do the best I could through works, not through love, but through works with her and her brothers, I honestly thought that we had a good relationship. And that's what I kind of want, to relate today, is that sometimes you think that you have a good relationship with your children, and come to find out you really don't. Like, you really did miss some things. And so when she brought those things to my attention, it hurt, because I realized that, boy, oh boy, what I thought I was doing, I missed the mark. But thank God I was receptive to what she was saying. I think, through apologies, through therapy myself, through us working together, we were able to open up the relationship. Although we weren't never at a place where we hated each other. We were never at a place that we weren't talking every day. So that's why sometimes things like that can sneak up on you, and you think that you're doing okay and you have a good relationship, but all the while everything else has been stuffed under a rug. And then once that rug is now lifted up, you're like, whoa, we didn't realize that we had that I had put so many things under the rug and just kind of filed it away. Yeah.
Dr. Brooks Davis, Jerry just said that she was receptive to it, to this mending, beginning the healing process. That's unusual, because usually when you have family rifts, interpersonal problems, nobody wants to hear it. I'm not here for that. I don't, that was then, this is now. What do you say to someone who doesn't want to hear it, who gives you the pushback when you are attempting the process of healing a relationship?
So the blessing is you don't have to have the other person agree to participate in your healing to receive your individual healing. So the goal is if you're a daughter and you go to your mother and you want her to participate in your healing so your relationship could heal, and your mother refuses. If you're a person of faith, you can pray for your mother. If you're not a person of faith, you can still make a decision in either case that I am going to speak with someone to get the healing that I need so that, number one, I can heal from past hurt. And number two, I can learn what type of mother I want to be moving forward. And you start a new pattern within your family system.
But isn't there a difference between healing and fixing a relationship?
Well, they're all merged together, right? So if I say that we have healed, it requires action because something has happened to my car. If my car is, my relationship, if my car is broken, I then need to go to the shop to have it fixed, the repair shop. That's what happens in relationships. You're going to a therapist, the therapist is helping you fix what's broken. And then when you drive off that lot, your car, we don't refer it to it, but it's healed. It is fixed, it's repaired. And I want to suggest that repairing relationships takes time. So it's not going to be a one-stop shop situation. You are invested in making this change lifelong.
Jamia, how do you feel when you hear now, and I'm sure you heard then, that your mother thought there was nothing wrong with the relationship that you had with her?
I would agree, actually. I mean, I feel like before your eyes are kind of opened, if that's just your normal, then you don't really see anything wrong with it, right? It's like, I like Dr. Brooks Davis's example about the car, but I took my daughter to an allergist, right? And I thought, okay, she's just having some asthma issues. But she told me that every day for her felt like she was breathing out of a straw. And when the straw was clamped shut, that's when she said something, because that straw was her baseline. So if unhealthy relationships are your baseline, you never really know what the difference is until you learn something different. So I don't feel like, that's an unfair assessment. I feel like it was very fair. Like we both felt, okay, I mean, it's all right. I guess that's what we're used to. Or if she said something I didn't really like, then I would just swallow it. But it's not until you get to a place where you're healing, you're determined to do something different. You're determined to have a different experience in this lifetime, that your perspective shifts, and then your expectations will also shift. So
let me be clear, because and my question was, you went to your mother because the relationship in your mind was not okay. Your mother thought that it was. You were attempting not only to heal yourself, but also healing the relationship.
right.
And so you could have, as Dr. Brooks Davis just said, you could have gone to your mother, she could have given you pushback, and you, already in therapy, decided to continue with your own healing. But I argue that the healing, the self-healing, and the relationship are two different things. And so would you have been able to accept, if your mother had given you the pushback as you were going through the process of your own healing?
Yeah. And I mean, I would not have had a choice. That would have been her choice, right? But as I aforementioned, I said I was committed to my own healing journey. And so at that point, the difference is most people choose the other person, right? They'll choose the other person. So I sacrifice my happiness, my healing, my wholeness for the comfort of someone else that's never going to be satisfied by my choices, right? And so the idea is that you choose you. And then oftentimes when you are going through your own healing process, it's not what you say, but it's the results that they see that then influence the change. And so whether or not they ever acknowledge it, whether or not she ever welcomed me in, I had to be committed before I had one conversation with her that I was going to be healed, that I was going to do something different in this life. And whatever she said, I had to be okay with that. Did it hurt? Would it have hurt? Absolutely. But my healing was greater than that. My purpose on this earth was greater than that.
We're going to take a break in just a bit, but I want to make sure that I have some resources. And it's really important for mothers and daughters who are experiencing this to have some help. And so I'll start with you, Dr. Brooks Davis. Can you give our listeners and our viewers some resources that can help them calm that mother-daughter storm?
So sure, I think first and foremost, it is identifying and locating a therapist that you can speak with in your respective area, because that person will be able to help you look at yourself in the mirror and then also challenge you to move beyond some of the unhealthy patterns that may have been within your respective family. And so certainly there's the Restoration Center where I work, but there's also websites like Psychology Today. There's the Association of Black Psychologists. There is also the National Association of Black Social Workers and the American Psychological Association.
Also, Jerry and Jamia, what resources would you offer our listeners and our viewers? Because Jamia, you were already, in counseling, and you two have gone through quite a bit of a transition since getting into this area of healing your relationship.
Yeah, so I mean, they're welcome to come to us as well for coaching, but like Dr. Brooks Davis said, I would recommend starting with therapy and getting in front of someone that can really help you to unpeel and unpack those layers. And then once you get through that healing phase, then seek a coach that can take you a little bit further. Someone that specializes in mother and daughter relationships, such as myself and my mom. But I would suggest any kind of mentor to sort of grow that relationship and take it a little bit deeper. And it always starts with you. So I would say that would be my recommendation in terms of resources. And if you don't financially have the resources, a lot of those websites that Dr. Brooks Davis recommended, they also have leads for like people that take people on sliding scales. There are some free resources on YouTube and things like that that can also help, but definitely seek some therapy.
Jerry, your thoughts?
Yes. And so basically the same thing with Mia. We definitely believe in therapy because there was the old adage that, Black people did not have access to therapy, nor did you get it. Because something was wrong with you if you did. But we truly believe in getting a therapist, getting that deep help that you need, because that therapist can take you back to where that hurt first began. And so seeking out a therapist, and then again, going to a coach that can help coach you from where you are to getting you to the place that you need to be. And so that's what we would recommend.
Well, thank you so much. Great information from all of you. I appreciate that. We are going to take a quick station break, and we're going to say goodbye to our 96.3 WHUR audience. But this conversation continues online on Sirius XM channel 141, HUR Voices, 96.3 HD2, and 98.3 FM. Mom and Me, A Time to Heal with Our Daughters on the Daily Drum will continue in just a few seconds. She is the apple of your eye, your mini-me, but sometimes the mother-daughter relationship can go a little sour. How do you get it on the right track? I'm Harold Fisher. Welcome back to our monthly WHUR WHUT-TV collaboration of the Daily Drum. My mother-daughter guests are Jerry Godhigh and Jamia Ponder. Our clinical expert is psychologist Dr. Frederica Brooks Davis, Executive Director of the Restoration Center Incorporated in Prince George's County, Maryland. Tonight's broadcast is being live streamed on WHUR.com, YouTube, and on Facebook. Now remember, we will not be taking any phone calls tonight. However, we invite you to join the conversation online using the hashtag Mothers and Daughters. I want to get back to the discussion. Mom and me, a time to heal with our daughters. One of the things that we often hear when you're talking about family disputes is the blame game. So how do you address what's right, what's wrong, and get to solutions beyond the finger pointing? I want to ask Dr. Brooks Davis that first, because that's one of those kind of therapy things. How do you begin to fix it?
So first, you set the tone where, number one, this is a safe space where everybody is going to be validated and your feelings are going to be heard. Number two, there is no right or wrong. So in this space, we want you to share how you experienced your mother. And as a result of that, your mother will in turn respond based on that, utilizing I statements. Oftentimes we get into a mode where we say you and we talk to the person. The goal is that we talk together using I statements, and then we affirm how the person felt, realizing that my intention may not have been for you to have that experience, but I respect that it was your experience. And if need be, I then apologize for the harm I may have caused intentionally or sometimes unintentionally.
So, but Dr. Brooks Davis, I mean, the reality is when you're talking about family conflicts, there's got to be a hothead or two. Okay, there it is. I'm coming to you next, Jerry. I heard that, so we're going to talk about that. So how do you deal with the hothead, the strong personality?
So you acknowledge the strong personality, but you don't give it power in the room, right? So you understand that this is a person is very strong-willed and they only want to see things their way. And you affirm them, you affirm the role, but through therapy and education about family systems, you also help them understand. Oftentimes, and I can't say this is true in Jerry's case, but oftentimes the strongest one in the room is truly the weakest one. But really what has happened is through their own pain and trauma, they've used that strength and they've needed to survive, but they've used it in a way to validate themselves and to say, hey, I'm in the room. But the therapist normalizes it and makes it such a way that you don't have to come off strong. This is a place of vulnerability for everybody. It takes work. Yes, it does. But even the strongest, at some point, if they desire to be healthy and whole, they in turn will still continue to be strong, but do what's necessary so the whole can heal individually and then collectively.
Okay, Jerry. Were you the hothead? You've given us all the impression that when Jamia came to you, you said, yes, dear, and I'm here to listen completely and fully to everything that you said. Kumbaya, let me hug you and embrace you. So that's not the way it happened?
So it is, honestly.
Oh, come on now.
No. So here's my part in this. I was not the hothead, right? I was always the peacemaker. So I was the one in between my husband and I and my daughter and my kids. So I was the one that says, to keep peace in the house, you just do what you need to do to make sure that everybody's happy. And so because of that, I didn't let her voice be heard. And so I kept saying, it's okay. You just apologize. You acknowledge your part in this and you do this, you do that, and not really fully heard what her pain was. And so I wasn't the hothead. I was the middle person, always trying to make things right. And sometimes that's the hardest place to be, because you're constantly trying to appease everyone else. And because of that, somebody is going to get left behind. And I think I gave more of the 90 to someone else, and then the 10% to my children. And so they then had to just kind of scuffle along and get it right and get it together, but their voices were not necessarily heard.
So
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But let's talk about when Jamia came to you. Was this something that you two did on your own? Were there other family members involved? Did they know what was going on? Did other family members have a role in helping this healing begin?
So the healing actually started when Mia decided in her own mind that she needed help. Because again, I was still oblivious to the fact that there was help needed. And so when she came to me and said, this is what she's doing, I was like, hooray, great. I mean, that's lovely. What do you need me to do? I mean, this is great for you. How did it go today? But it was never that I needed to heal and get some help myself. And so she was on that journey a lot by herself until she kind of, dragged me in as it relates to, Mom, why don't you just look at this? Why don't you read this? And then I had an awakening that was like, oh my gosh, I really didn't realize that I was absent for her life. And so it was never really against it, but she did bring in her husband to help her through that process as well. So she was really out there on her own, honestly.
So you're, aside from her husband, but there were no other family members playing a role in the healing process once Jamia came to you?
Not at that point, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay. What did you do for yourself once she came to you and, as you say, dragged you into this, not kicking and screaming, but with flowers and rainbows, as you've said?
Well, I mean, it was kind of dragging because I didn't know I needed it. But as, when she pointed some things out to me and said, hey, why don't you look at this movie? And in that movie, I realized that I kind of abandoned my kids. I acted like nothing was wrong. I painted a clear picture that we were living in this glass bowl and we all had to be perfect and we all were the God highs and doggone it, we're all going to be great. And so when I realized of the damage that I did to her and my sons, I had to apologize, but I also had to get some help for myself and realize, why did I do those things? Why didn't I take my kids and run? What was going on in my mind that I checked out? I wasn't on drugs or anything like that, but I emotionally checked out. All I was trying to do is get them from kindergarten to the end of high school, and the best way I could. And so I did. I had to get therapy, and then I got coaching, and then I got free. Bless God. I mean, it was not an easy journey because I had to deal with some things that happened to me in my life, but I also had to still be there for her as she was going through. And I believe that it made us better.
So,
Jamia, your mother said that your husband was part of this process. How did he help? What was his role in this healing process for you and your mother?
So my husband helped a lot in terms of emotionally being supportive to me, but I laugh because the funny thing is I had no idea going into this what kind of support system he would be, because I didn't know what I needed. And so he was there to listen to me. And in fact, as a result of the molestation, I had experienced incredible difficulties in terms of intimacy in our marriage. And so talking to him about that, you asked, okay, my mom, was she open arms at first? There were a lot of conversations I had with my husband that he was like not trying to hear, because it sounded like I was attacking him when it was really not about that at all. It was about, this is where I am, and this is how it's impacting me, and this is what we need to do together. But he was there to listen to me, to hold me when I cried. I think we were married 9 years before he even really saw me cry. And so you talk about having to keep it together for so long, paint the picture. I can handle it. I can do it. But all the while drowning. So he was a great support during that time, and ended up, as a result, getting his own therapy. So it turned out to be a domino effect. But I was, in fact, on this journey largely alone in the beginning.
Dr. Brooks Davis, you were going to add something.
Yes, I do want us to say that even the current literature, this idea within the African American community that we have to be strong Black women is something that unfortunately is a negative impact in that what does it mean to be strong? And you talked earlier about the strong woman in the room. Oftentimes we find that mothers are not in touch with their feelings and emotions, particularly if they were in a generational situation where a strong Black woman is defined by you work, you don't ask anybody for help, you do this, this, and this, so it's all works. So then oftentimes what you have to do in therapy is really look at a feelings chart and help your clients understand what and identify how they actually are feeling. So sometimes the resistance is the unknown. They don't even realize that they have not acknowledged their feelings because they don't know they exist because they weren't taught that. And then the second part I want to say is like Jenga. When you go in therapy and you start healing yourself, as Jamia did, just as she explained, when you move one block, it impacts others. So part of also going into therapy is knowing that when I start my healing, everybody else may not be where I am. And I have to be okay with that. If as I get healed, I want to go to them to bring them in, but they resist. So it's helpful to know that as well. And I don't want people to believe that if they go to their parent when they leave, their mom, when they leave watching tonight, that in fact, their mom's going to be receptive. And two, they aren't aware that it's a lot of work that you have to do. And not everybody's going to be ready for that work because they want you to stay in the role that you've always played in their life for their own selfish motivating reasons.
Right. Dr. Brooks Davis, we've been kind of talking about for the last few minutes the healing process, but I want to go back to the childhood piece because Jamia had siblings. And even though she was shutting down, what would you recommend to a sibling who notices that these things are happening, that there is a divide, a crack in the relationship? Would you recommend that a sibling step in? She had brothers, for example. A lot of this stuff was happening, dare I say, during, that puberty, during that, that change for young girls. Can a family member step in? If so, how can they talk to them, a sibling?
Sure. I think a family member can step in provided that family member is willing to use I statements. And so what I mean by that, it could be that a brother could say to a sister, I noticed something going on with you and mom. Is everything okay? Is there anything that I can do to support you? And sometimes it could then be that sibling goes with the person they're concerned about and request a family meeting. And together they're able to sit down. And so there could be strength in numbers. So I do think, yes, family members can do it as long as they use their I statements and are clear about their motivations for doing so. And then I would say the sibling, if they're old enough, or the family member should provide resources for the family, right? Because since you're a part of this family system, if you're saying to me, I need to treat my daughter differently, but I'm looking at how you treat your daughter, it may be hard for me to receive that. So the family member is often coming to say, I noticed something, I'm concerned, here's some resources to help you along the way.
Jamia, did any of your siblings try to talk to you? Did they notice anything? Did you, since you could not, or felt that you could not talk to your mother about what was happening, where did you go, if anywhere at all?
No. So they were my first brother. is 6 years younger than me. So 6 years in developmental years, kid years is a big gap.
Yes.
And they were taught kind of to mind your business. Ain't nobody talking to you. If you're not being spoken to, right, don't speak.
Yes.
And so they didn't really have a place to stand up for me in that respect. And so, but by the time that they really were aware of it, everybody kind of knew where the issues stood. And so we all knew not to say anything. So to answer your question, no, they didn't come to my aid. And then by the time that we really started to revisit some of the issues, now that we're all grown, you know, they still have that same mentality. Like, well, it doesn't impact me really, because it's not my issue, so to speak. Yep, I saw it, but it wasn't really my issue. So what do I say?
Where did you go? Or did you just stay to yourself?
Yeah, I just stayed to myself. I had one aunt that I would talk to on occasion about it, but it wasn't until I was in college that she and I really started to communicate. But before that, I didn't really talk to anybody about it.
You know, Dr. Brooks Davis, of course, the title of this program is, you know, Mom and Me. And with that said, I think probably one of the most helpful pieces for mothers, particularly young mothers who are paying attention to this program, is trying to figure out what kind of mother they are, what kind of mother they want to be, or even some women who are not mothers yet but plan to be. Can you kind of run through that a little bit? Give me a mom 101. You know, is it the angel and the devil mom? What kind of moms are there?
So I think that there are moms, as you mentioned, who have a desire. There are women who desire to have children, but they are afraid to have children because of their experience as a daughter. And so to that particular mother, or any woman, even if they have children or they don't, but they want to be a mother or are currently a mother, you can decide after watching this program this evening that you want to be a different mother. You can always reset. So
Yes.
To the one who has not had children, I would recommend that they write down what were the things that they enjoyed in their relationship with their mother and what were the things that they could do without. And then as they work through that, what kind of mother would you like to be? And based upon that, if they need to, go speak with a therapist to then learn how can they be that woman. And then in terms of mothers who have children and they watched this program this evening and said, I see myself in Jerry, I would then say to them, listen from her wisdom and you go to your daughter as opposed to waiting for your daughter to come to you. My mother, as we became adults, she asked us, how was our childhood? But she was in a space to hear what we had to say.
Yeah, I was about to say that, because that's a whole mood right there. Giving your child space to give you a parenting report card. But please, I want to hear about that. Please go right ahead.
Yeah, so we did. And I can honestly say, I think my mom, she initiated, my daddy participated. We grew up with family meetings, but it was extremely vulnerable for them to do. But they were genuine and said there will be, in doing this, it's okay, whatever you say. And my siblings and I had an opportunity to do that. And it was extremely healing for us to do it because we then knew and understand that they did their best as parents. But in doing your best, sometimes you make mistakes. However, I will say that oftentimes, really at the end of the day, why adults don't want to hear feedback from their children is because it's going to open up, in some cases, old wounds that they don't want to deal with. And that's what you find generationally. So when you talked earlier about Jamia, who could you talk to? Well, if she would have tried to go to a sibling of Jerry's who had the same understanding from their parent, now it's like, oh, I don't want to help you because in doing that, I got to address my own stuff that I have tucked away. So it is difficult work because you have to acknowledge the source of what has happened.
Absolutely.
Jerry, what grade would you give yourself?
Well,
I'm putting it out there for you. So.
Well, I mean, I would probably give myself a 5, honestly, because I believe that in the past I didn't do a great job. If you ask me now, I would give myself a 9, because I feel like I've done better. And like Dr. Davis Brooks said, I then allowed my kids to also tell me they gave me a grade. It wasn't always easy to hear, and I'm sure I was hurt a little bit, but I also sympathize and I listened to where they were. So from Jamia down to almost my last son, give me a report card. Tell me how I did and what you're still struggling with. And they shared why they're struggling with certain things because of maybe some actions that myself or my husband did. And so, yeah, I'm glad to hear it. It hurts and it is self-work. It is a lot of work, but it also gives them some healing as well.
Yeah, but look at where you are.
And I'd like to add one thing.
Yeah.
Dr. Brooks Davis was talking about sort of the, to either current mothers or people who wanted to be mothers. But one exercise that I did in therapy, because some people will be like, well, I don't even know what kind of mother I want to be. But one exercise that I completed in therapy was writing a letter from each one of my children to myself on my 99th birthday. And in that letter, I had to descriptively write the things that they said, right? Kind of in like a toast scenario. And so I wrote out this beautiful letter from each one of my children, from each of their vantage points, kind of using some of their language. And then I had to assess at the end of that, were the actions that I was currently displaying, the things that I was currently doing, the type of mother that I am currently, does it line up to get me to that end goal? And if not, I needed to make some adjustments. And so that was a stark eye opener. Like, we want our kids to say, my mom was there for me. She was present. I could tell her anything, a hug would heal. We want our kids to say those things, but do our current actions line up with that? So,
Jamia, what grade would you give yourself as a mother?
I'm in progress. How about that? I am officially under construction. No, I'm officially under construction, honestly. My kids are 13, 8, and 7, and each one of them needs something different from me. And so I would say S for satisfactory, but I'm always a work in progress. And so I think that check-in that Dr. Brooks Davis parents gave to her and her siblings, and the same one that my mother provided to us in our older years, that I periodically give that to my kids and ask them, because we all change, we all evolve. And so I think the practice is to really do that in increments of time over their lives, to check in and see what they need, because what they need at 5 is vastly different than what they need at 12. So
you were going to say something, Dr. Brooks Davis?
No, thank you.
Oh,
I was just agreeing.
You're going to stay out of the grading scale. And I do want to, because we're going to be coming to a close shortly, but I really want to have some takeaways for our listeners and for our viewers, because all of the relationships are different. There's some key components that kind of come into play with any healthy situation. And so, for me, I would think the ability to listen without judgment and to be accepting of the other person's truths is critical. But, and I'll start with you, Jerry. Share some final thoughts about this that could be helpful to our listeners and viewers.
Sure. So my final thoughts would be is to listen to your children, no matter what age they are. They're never too young to share what's on their mind. Sometimes we think little kids don't know what they're talking about or what they're doing, but they do. They learn at an early age and they understand their environment. They know what's going on, even though they may not know how to express it. But listen to your children, be available to them, because our world now is different than the world for the boomers and for the Generation X. The world is different. So be a good listener and try to be as much a part of their life as you possibly can, and be willing to hear what you may or may not have done correctly. Because, we didn't come in this world with a book. of how to be a good parent. We're learning day by day. And so don't beat up yourself, but do find help and know that no time is too late.
Jamia, quickly, your thoughts that may help some of our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, I would say seek to understand first. Understanding a person's life story and their vantage point can often help you to extend empathy where it's due, and some grace and some understanding on how they even arrived at that point. So I would say to listen, to understand, and not to just respond. I feel like we do that a lot. And then my other thing is to be reminded that communication is a practice, and we only get better at it by doing it.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Dr. Brooks Davis, from the counselor's couch, some recommendations.
Yes, to those who believe that you have to maintain being a strong Black woman or a strong woman, know that vulnerability actually equals strength. Secondly, just because your mother and grandmother told you that they didn't have time to listen to you, it doesn't mean you can't listen to your daughter. And thirdly, I would recommend therapy, therapy, therapy.
Yes.
Okay. Well, there it is from the counselor's couch. I really want to thank my guests for joining me this evening for this really great conversation, this important conversation, Mom and Me, a time to heal for our daughters. And we certainly hope that you were able to gain some insight into your own family and will move to safely building healthy relationships with your loved ones. There is always, always time to heal. I'm Harold Fisher. Thank you for watching and listening. Good night.